Joe, yesterday it was reported that Clemson is also now, along with Florida State, suing the ACC on a lot of this being the granted rights deal. And look, it's pretty much a lot of the same stuff that's going on with Florida State. I mean, if you haven't kept up with it, I guess we can talk about that a little bit. But Joe, Clemson suing the ACC, your thoughts?
Yeah. For me, I think it's really stupid that Clemson's trying to make this move. And I understand from the financial aspect of this, the way in which the Big Ten and the SEC schools, the amount of money that in the near future that they're going to be making compared to the ACC and the Big 12, it's going to be significantly growing. In the Ross Dellinger article on Yahoo Sports, it mentioned how within 3 years, earnings are going to be doubled for the Big Ten and the SEC, being 80 to 90 million in annual conference distribution compared to the ACC, which is going to be 45 to 50. That argument to me makes a lot of sense for Florida State because they are a program that is going to continually draw eyes from a national perspective. As much as it's a Florida-based brand and it's still a national brand, it's one of those programs where I could go to most parts of the country, and I've even had this happen where I've just talked to random people and they're like, I'm a Florida State fan. It's like, cool, that's really random, but it kind of makes sense. For Clemson's sake, it's a little bit more regional. And I think that for how they're going to be successful in football, it benefits them, and it did benefit them, that they were one of the few good teams in their conference. And then you have this automatic qualifier. If Florida State leaves, you are going to consistently be the best team that consistently goes to the college football playoff every single year. Will you be getting a little bit less money? Yes. But do you want to win national championships? If that's the goal, you need to take advantage of the opportunity that you have the weakest and lightest path while all these other teams beat up on one another. I think it's really stupid. I think that they are going to go into the Big Ten. I don't think that the SEC is going to take them because of the footprint that they already have in that general region. They're going to go to the Big Ten. They're going to get swallowed up, and they're going to be a mid-tier team. They're going to be like Penn State at the best. I don't think that they're going to produce the results that they think that they're going to get by transitioning to a different conference.
You had my curiosity in the beginning of the show when you said you were thinking outside the box here on this one. Now you have my attention. The issue that I push back on you on is that their argument is not a conference problem. Like they even
it's financial.
It's all financial. So if Joe, it feels as if that look, being a national title contender is not what they're thinking about. I do think, though, you bring up an interesting point that, hey, man, like you could run the ACC if Florida State and Miami or North Carolina leave. Like you could be the dominant program there. I do think that that's very interesting. I don't think that they care, though. I think this is a lot like what Florida State's going through. Like, hey, man, we see, teams in our own teams in our own state, South Carolina for Clemson, and then you got Florida or Florida State looking at Florida like, man, they're making millions, tens, 20s, millions more than we are. Thought it was interesting, though, Joe, that a lot of this with ESPN was redacted. Did you see that? Like they had redacted and they blanked out a lot of their contracts with ESPN. Very shady, because what are you hiding? Like, why did you have to redact your contract with ESPN? Why is that contract redacted? What's in that contract that you don't want anybody to see? I thought was look, here's what we talked about, Joe, a couple of months or 2, 3, 4, 5 months ago, was that there was going to be another school along with Florida State that sues the ACC. Mm-hmm. We didn't know who it was going to be. We thought it might be Miami. We didn't know. Okay. It was obviously always just going to be Clemson with a P. But now I think the biggest thing in them suing them yesterday for me was, why is everybody trying to be so secretive between this ESPN deal? And how much is ESPN finagling things to try to get some of these teams out of the ACC?
I mean, so this is where it gets really confusing and why, like, I almost don't even want to truly speculate, because ESPN doesn't have more money to go and pay a larger deal necessarily. Like it is something that has constantly been talked about, how linear TV, the amount of available money to go and spend on these things is slowly starting to dwindle. So it's going to make it more difficult.
Can I ask you a quick question? Wouldn't they just shift it like what they did with the Pac-12?
Yeah, I would assume that they would, but the amount of money that they're giving to the ACC is far less than what they're giving to a conference like the way far less. So what I'm kind of getting at here is, if they try these other conferences, if they bring them in, they have to then shrink the amount of money that is being divided amongst all of the other teams. So this is where I get confused on why these TV networks would be motivated to try and make these conferences move around. If anything, it's better for them to pay less money to a team like Florida State. So that's where it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't know what they're trying to pull. I don't even know if they're even truly involved, if they just don't want to be held accountable for certain things. I know that they are, but it just doesn't make any sense to me why they would be willingly wanting to pay more money.
Well, I don't think that they would pay more money. Let me give you an example. Okay. And let me poke holes in your thought just very quickly. I wouldn't be able to, because I think it's a conversation we had about Texas and Oklahoma coming into the SEC. It's the same exact thing that they were going to do the Big 12. Hey, when your contract runs out and those teams leave, we're giving you different distribution. Right? Like, I don't think that they're just going to shift the money. If Florida State and Clemson leaves, hey, if we're paying you, $60 million a year, we're going to pay you $40 million a year, okay? Because those teams are out of the conference, okay? Like, their contract is up. So, or the way that it's even contracted, I think, is in 2026, like, there can be a renegotiation and ESPN can void the deal in 2026. That's why I got redacted. Because ESPN doesn't want everybody knowing their business. I think it's more of a deep, dark conspiracy theory that ESPN is moving behind the scenes on getting a conference realignment. Joe, I really do think that all of this is being run by ESPN.
Yeah, at the end of the day, there is truth to what you're saying right there, where if these teams decide to move around, ESPN or Fox would want to be the one who is making that push and that decision, because they don't want to be paying for a rights deal for the ACC, and you're paying for a crap product on the field. No one wants to pay to watch. There's a reason why the CW scooped up rights, because the value of those rights is slowly it's going down. As little as they're currently they're paying for it, we're starting to see that it's not garnering the viewership that they would hope for. So that's the only thing I could take away from this, is that, as you're talking about, in 2026, they would end their media rights deal, and earlier than they anticipated. And then they would then try to make a move to move one of these teams to a better conference where they wouldn't re-up the ACC, and then they would have a better product that's on the field in a different conference. It's the only way I can make sense of it.
That's all that they're doing. And because it gets more, let me tell you what they're ultimately doing. Okay, it's not rocket science. Florida State playing Wake Forest or North Carolina football wise doesn't draw the eyeballs that Florida State playing, pick a random school in the SEC. Florida. I mean, the two highest viewed games for Florida State last year, ironically, Florida and LSU. It wasn't even, because the truth was both of those fan bases are going to draw more eyeballs and help compete with Florida State to get them where they need to go. It's going to be the same with Clemson. Ironically, remember when Spencer Rattler and the boys beat Clemson a couple years ago? Clemson's highest viewed game in the regular season, guess what it was?
Who was that?
South Carolina. So I think, Joe, what ESPN's ultimately trying to do is, hey man, why are we paying this much money when those teams can go to other conferences and the viewership will be more, and everybody, ourselves included, can make more money? What do we care about Clemson and Wake Forest in week 3 for?
No one does, and that's I think what the realization is. I want to add this though, Blake. I don't think, as everyone's projecting, and I mean, I even stupidly tweeted it, I don't think that this means that the ACC is guaranteed to die. I
I
don't
don't
think
either.
I don't think that it means that it's going to fall apart because of what the Pac-12 was dealing with regionally and situationally. It was going to be impossible for them as a conference to go and find replacements. It just didn't make a lot of sense. There were not a lot of very good options. But I look at the AAC and I see so many potential easy steals like they just did with SMU that they
They
could
could
go
go
and
get
pull from.
Tulane. They could get Troy,
The Appalachian State, Coastal
Appalachian State.
Carolina, which are coming from
Right.
the Sun Belt. But in the American, you mentioned Tulane. I mean, UConn's an independent. I don't think that it would, and I
Oh
know that
God,
UConn was
please don't go
previously
get
just,
UConn. Well,
they
you
were
could.
previously just a member.
You could for basketball though.
That would be desirable. So this is what I'm getting at is that you're worrying about, you're not, if you're the ACC, you're not losing any of the premier basketball and other sport entities necessarily, because like Florida State's not very good, Clemson's not very good. I know that Clemson's in the tournament this year, but you could turn around, and as long as you can keep North Carolina, which I know we're going to talk about in 1 second, there's a lot of opportunities to pull from all these teams in other areas that they'd be fine, because the Northeast and just the East Coast in general has good programs, not elite programs, but good enough programs where they're going to be able to recover. I don't think that the ACC dies. It's just going to look different.
I could see that. I could, they got to act quickly though. They got to act very quickly.
Well, they have an example to turn to of saying, look what happened to the Pac-12. We can't let that happen to us.
Well, they have an example. That's why they went into Dallas of all places and got SMU, a big time market. I think it's a really good take by you.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.